Good evening, and welcome to Skep Talk, the monthly speaker series hosted by the Bay Area Skeptics. Before tonight's presentation, a few words about Bay Area Skeptics. As North America's oldest skeptical organization, we are dedicated to promoting critical thinking, logic, and rational thought. In the 1970s and 80s, scientists such as Carl Sagan and magicians such as James Randi established the scientific skepticism movement out of concern about the popular fondness for pseudoscience and the lack of public science literacy. Scientific skepticism embraces evidence-based civil discourse on health, education, consumer protection, and especially the investigation of extraordinary claims. Using the scientific method, we hope to promote skeptical inquiry to reduce irrational thinking in society. This talk is supported by Bay Area Skeptics members such as you. Please visit us at baskeptics.org or join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Meetup. Consider supporting us through convenient monthly donations via Patreon. Patrons receive premiums such as discounts and free t-shirts for our annual Skeptical Conference. But more importantly, members help us make the world just a little more reasonable and rational. And now, tonight's speaker.
Good evening. So what happens when you turn ghost hunts and paranormal challenges into classroom assignments? In this talk, our guests will share, among other things, how students test extraordinary claims firsthand. Good evening. My name is Gwen Olson, and I am a member of the board of the Bay Area Skeptics organization, and I will be your host for tonight's Skep Talk. We are honored to have as our speaker tonight, Dr. Rodney Schmaltz. Dr. Schmaltz is currently a professor in the Department of Psychology at MacEwan University in Edmonton, Alberta. His research focuses on pseudoscientific thinking with an emphasis on strategies to promote and teach rational skepticism, which, as we can all attest, can be extremely challenging. He also examines misconceptions about workplace productivity and self-control, applying the same critical lens to popular but unsubstantiated claims about performance and motivation. In both domains, his work emphasizes the importance of evidence-based reasoning and the need to distinguish scientific findings from widely held yet unsupported beliefs. Dr. Schmaltz aims to improve scientific literacy in both academic and public settings, using research-based strategies to help people separate good information from bad. And to this end, Dr. Schmaltz was a recipient of the Distinguished Teaching Award in 2019. This award is one of the highest honors bestowed by MacEwan University. Dr. Schmaltz, welcome to Bay Area Skeptics.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And I can't hear you. Ah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, take it away.
Some minor technical problems, but as long as everybody else can hear me, we'll move ahead. So again, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that I do in my course on scientific skepticism. But before I get to that, I want to share with you an interesting study. It's an older one, but it's a good one. So this is data from the 1970s. There's 1 million high school students that were surveyed, and they were asked, how do you fare in your ability in terms of leadership? Are you above average? 70% said that they're above average. Now, as we understand averages, that can't be true, right? You can't have 70 above average. So that's interesting. But where it gets more interesting is they were asked, are you above average on your ability to get along with others? 100% said they were above average. In fact, 25% thought they were in the top 1%. So how does that relate to skepticism? How does that relate to what we're talking about today? Well, I think the same idea holds true with critical thinking. So much like these students all believed they were above average in their ability to get along with others, I think nearly everyone thinks they're above average in their ability to think critically. And there's some research backing this up. Lyons did some work in 2021, And he asked people if they had the ability to discern between real and fake news. 90% said that they're above average. But then he actually tested them, and 3 out of 4 people overestimated their abilities. One of my honors students did a little bit of work in this area. It was for an honors thesis, and they asked the question, are you a good critical thinker, to students on our campus? And 75% strongly agreed or agreed, and only 10% disagreed or strongly disagreed. So what's going on here? If you look at the mandates across high schools, universities, some businesses, critical thinking is always highlighted. Critical thinking is a core component of education. And if that's true, then theoretically, we should all be pretty good critical thinkers. Unfortunately, as everyone here knows, that is not necessarily the case. Now, I think one of the problems is that the term itself has become so broad that it kind of doesn't mean anything anymore. So I'm going to give you just a couple definitions, and there are many. So here's one way critical thinking is framed, and this is an older definition. So critical thinking is disciplined, self-directed thinking, which exemplifies the perfections of thinking appropriate to a particular mode or domain of thought. Okay, I guess. Here's one from an educational policy. To think critically is essentially to engage in deliberations with the intention of making a judgment based on appropriate criteria. All right. Here's another, and this one is my favorite in the sense that it could mean almost anything. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Okay, give these definitions to an instructor and tell them to teach that. It can be literally anything that you're teaching, right? What I think is happening is that we go through school and we go through university and we're told again and again that we're being taught critical thinking. And what we're being taught might be great, but I don't think that it's critical thinking in the way that most of the people here would frame critical thinking. So what should we do? I'm not saying that we need to completely lose the definition, but what we really need to focus on, and what I focus on in my classes, is scientific skepticism. So as described by Carl Sagan, we're approaching claims with an open mind and a willingness to accept only those claims that have survived the scrutiny of rigorous scientific tests. So, I mean, this differs from cynicism, right? That implies closed-mindedness. That's not what we're talking about. The goal is to help people think scientifically, to help people become aware of our biases, and to take advantage of the tools of the scientific method and try to overcome them. So that's what my courses are about. For the past 15 years or so, I've been teaching a class focused on scientific skepticism and pseudoscience, and I also weave these ideas throughout my courses. It's challenging because people have a lot of strongly held beliefs coming into these, perhaps showing them that maybe the evidence isn't that good for that. And not only that, when we're talking about things like pseudoscience, there's the demarcation problem. Sometimes the difference between science and pseudoscience is not that clear. So there are a lot of challenges in tackling this. So where I like to start is discussing who falls prey to pseudoscience. And the answer is all of us. We can all fall prey to pseudoscience. I think anyone who is interested in skepticism or is a member of the skeptical community, you probably became interested because you believed in something and then learned there was no evidence for that belief. Certainly not everyone, but I bet a lot of you, myself included. What I like to share with my students at the beginning of the term is that the ability to think scientifically, to combat pseudoscience, has nothing to do with intelligence. Intelligent people can believe some bizarre things. Now, a couple reasons. Let's go back to schools. IQ tests don't really test thinking critically in the way that I'm framing it, or thinking scientifically. And what researchers have found is that a high IQ is actually correlated with the ability to defend a position but negatively correlated with the ability to consider alternative positions. The reason why is that people with a high IQ have this strong ideological immune system. Basically, they're very good at generating arguments for what they believe, but they're not so good at hearing the counter arguments and considering them. Let me give you an example, and this is one I like to share with my students as well. That is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He is the creator of Sherlock Holmes. He was knighted for his contributions to literature, an absolutely brilliant author. However, he was also a fan of the spiritualists, and he believed in them. Now, spiritualism hit its heyday in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was this idea that people could talk to the dead. This is seances, things like that. And at the seances, there were very kind of cheap parlor tricks to try to make it seem as though some people could communicate with the dead. Something as simple as producing ectoplasm. So there's this idea that those from beyond could manifest themselves physically, and the person conducting the seance would start gagging and then pulling things out of their mouth, and that was the ectoplasm. That was supposedly the evidence that there was communication with spirits. The way it was done is that before the person running the seance started, they just stuck cheesecloth in their cheeks, and when it was time, they'd start gagging it out. That's it. That fooled the author of Sherlock Holmes. So, is he a good critical thinker? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that he was fooled and he believed in a lot of pseudoscientific ideas. I like to talk a lot about cognitive biases in my class, and I spend a long time on this. I propose that fundamentally we're hardwired for belief. And challenging those beliefs is really hard just because, again, of the way we're hardwired. And these biases are universal. Scientists have them, skeptics have them, believers have them. And they're not character flaws per se, it's just how our minds work. So the goal isn't to eliminate these biases, you can't, but the goal is to recognize them and then be able to work around them. So I'll just talk about a few of the things that I bring up in my class. So I talk about biases like confirmation. This is one of the most powerful forces working against good skepticism. Confirmation bias means that we tend to remember or seek out things that we agree with, but will dismiss, deny, ignore things that don't fit our beliefs. It's so powerful that when someone agrees with us or we find information that supports our beliefs, we actually get a dopamine hit. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasurable emotions. This drives a lot of what we experience in the world. So let's take two people that go to the house you see pictured here. Bit of a creepy house. And one person believes in ghosts. They walk in and the floor squeaks. Aha! Must be a ghost. There's a chill in the air. Must be a ghost. Every little thing would fit that narrative of ghost. But if you take someone who doesn't believe into the exact same house, they'll say it's a squeaky floorboard. Well, it's an old house. There's a chill in the air. Yeah, we're by a window. It's completely different. So you have two people that have experienced the same thing, but they've interpreted it in greatly different ways. And there's research showing that people who believe in things like ghosts are much more likely to have these experiences in places that are supposedly haunted. Now, what's the antidote to this? What we need to do is actively seek out disconfirming evidence. What we want is to search for the best version of the other side's arguments, not the weakest. We're not trying to win an argument. We're really trying to understand where people are coming from. And to help ourselves as well be sure that we don't fall prey to things like confirmation bias, we always need to consider we could be wrong, and we should think about what the strongest argument is against what we believe. So confirmation bias is automatic, and it really makes us we have to step back and force ourselves to consider other opinions. One of the other biases I spend quite a lot of time on, this is almost kind of an ironic one, is the bias blind spot. All right. Let's go back to that survey of high school students. Now remember, it was 100 or a million high school students were surveyed, and 100% said that they were above average in their ability to get along with others. All of them did. Now, when you hear that, you might go, oh, well, high school students, I can see how people would do that. But let me ask you this. If I were to ask you, and you were being honest, are you above average in your ability to get along with others? Almost all of us would say, well, yes, but I mean, it's different. I think I'm above average in my ability to get along with others, but we can't all be above average, right? And this ties into the bias blind spot. We think errors in judgment are more common in others than ourselves. And really, that's what the scientific method is about, is trying to control these biases. So even when we learn about these biases, we are more likely to think other people have them than we do. And unfortunately, we all have these biases. In my courses, I try to get as much hands-on activities as much as I can do to get the students really thinking differently about pseudoscience. So I don't think it's enough just to throw the stats at them and throw paper after paper, although we talk about a lot of research and so on. So what I want to do is walk you through a few of the activities that I've been found have been quite effective and have helped students get a better understanding of what is pseudoscience and what isn't. So in my course, after I've lectured on cognitive biases and talked about pseudoscience, the demarcation problem, and so on, I have what's known as the Pseudoscience Super Challenge. What I do is I give students 20 minutes. They have to work in pairs, and they have to go find the best example of pseudoscience within walking distance. I don't let them drive. I don't want anybody to get into an accident. So they have 20 minutes. When they get back to the class, they have a few minutes to prepare, and then they present their case as to why they found the best example. Then everybody in the class votes on it. You can't vote for yourself, and the winners get free coffee. So I have there's some stakes in it. So it's there's big prizes. You get a free coffee, 2 coffees, one for each. The point of this is that it shows how easy it is to find pseudoscience. We're on a university campus. People walk off campus, and there was a shop that sold crystals. It closed a few years ago, which they probably should have seen that coming with the crystals. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Here's a few of the things that they found. At a nearby pharmacy, students found a homeopathic breast enhancer. The idea here is that you take several pills a day and your breasts become larger. And they also found homeopathic teething remedies, among many other things. So products that clearly do not work, but they're available nearby within minutes. And there are some books in the library and so on. There's all kinds of things out there. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've only had one group ever not find anything. And to be honest, I think they just went for the coffee in advance. I don't think they actually looked. Every other group, hundreds of groups, have all found something within a 20-minute walk on campus, which is pretty remarkable. The point is to show how prevalent pseudoscience is and that it's all around us. I also teach them how to become psychics. To become a good psychic, it takes about 45 minutes. You'll be a great psychic, but you'll be pretty good. How do I do it? I use Ray Hyman's Secrets of Cold Reading. So Ray Hyman, as I'm sure you all know, one of the founders of the modern skeptical movement, and he's hosted workshops on how to do cold reading. And I've taken some of the ideas that he's used in these workshops, and I show my students how to conduct a cold read. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with what a cold reading is, that's basically looking at somebody you don't know, and then you're reading them. So you're looking for clues about the person. So what might you do? Basically, you start at the top, work your way down. If they've got a nice haircut, are they dressed well? Well, then they probably have some money. You look to see if they have a wedding ring or not. It's not definitive that they'll be married, but it'll give you a clue. And then you start asking lots of questions. So if the person was, say, dressed really poorly, you might say, I feel like what brings you here today is related to money. And you hope the person tells you things. And then you just start building off it. And if you're wrong about that, you can actually blame the person. And what you say is like, so I said it was about money, and you said that that's not the case. So why do you think it is that I felt like it was? The psychics who are good are so good, it is incredibly compelling. And I also talked to them a bit about hot reading as well. So hot reading is when you find some information about the person you're going to read in advance. What I have the students do to show you how easy this is I have them hot read themselves. Go online and see how much information they can find, and it's pretty remarkable. You can find a lot. So within 45 minutes, they are then doing psychic readings on one another, and they are quite compelling. One of the elements in these psychic readings is I have them create a Barnum statement, also a Forer statement. This is based on the research, this is older research, where students were given a diagnostic interest blank personality test, which is a made-up test, but they were told that it was supposed to be a test that would really reflect their personality. They then had feedback a week later, and the feedback had lines like this. You have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a tendency to be critical of yourself, and so on. My favorite line from this is that at times you are extroverted, affable, sociable, while at other times you're introverted, wary, and reserved. Well, yeah, everybody will be those things, right? Now, the point, as many of you probably know, is that everyone who completed this test thought they were getting a personality reading that was specific to them, when in fact, everybody received the same reading. So everybody received things like, you have found it unwise to be too frank in revealing yourself to others. Now, before the participants in this study realized what was happening, they were asked to rate out of 5 how accurate was the reading. And 5 being the highest, the average was 4.26. Everybody thought that it really fit them. So this is how horoscopes work. This is how psychics work. And in my class, I have my students create a Forer statement, and they come up with things that are arguably better than what you'd find in the daily horoscope and better than what a lot of psychics are using. I'm also interested in showing students how to test extraordinary claims. I'm not teaching a class on cynicism. When we hear extraordinary claims, we shouldn't dismiss them out of hand, but what we should do is ask questions. How was it tested? How do we know that? How could we know that? So I've been lucky enough to pair with the Center for Inquiry Investigations group, and they host the Paranormal Challenge. The Paranormal Challenge is a test where if you can show any form of paranormal ability under carefully controlled conditions, you can win $500,000. And the money is there. This is real. So I'm working with Stan West, Randy Westendorf, and Jim Underdown. And when they get applications for the Paranormal Challenge, they send some of them to my class. And my class designs a test. So there's real money at stake here. Now, the way the test works is that the applicants first have to pass a pre-test, which is not quite as stringent. If they pass that, they then get to go to the real test for the $500,000. This has been going on for many, many years. No one has ever passed the pre-test. So we've been working over the past couple of years on a number of applications, and then the ones that were able to agree with a protocol with the applicant, we test them over Zoom. So I'll just quickly show you what we did this semester. The first test we had was a person that claimed that they could read minds at a long distance. So we had one of the people in our class look at a word, and then the applicant, who was in, I believe, the Philippines, would then be able to read the word just by simply looking at the person. So they couldn't see the word, they could see the person. And so we showed the applicant 10 words. We then scrambled the words, had our person look at the different words one at a time, and the applicant made their guess. And after 3 guesses, which they all got wrong, they stopped. They had to hit 8 out of 10. They were 0 for 3, and they gave up. Now, the nice thing about this, though, is that they are welcome to try again in a year. So in a year, there's kind of a cooling off period, and they can give it another shot. One of our other applicants claimed that they could diagnose illnesses just by looking at someone. They could do it live, or they could do it with photos. So we had a combination of both. We had 10 different people volunteer, and so we had some photos, some live over Zoom, and then we gave the applicant the photo or the live image of the person and 4 diseases, and they had to pick which one was correct. They had to get 18 out of 20. They got the first one right, which I have to admit was a little scary. And then they got the next 5 wrong, and it was over. They were quite sure, though, that they can do it. They're going to try again in a year. And finally, we had an applicant that claimed they could tell whether a photo was covered or not. So this is it. So I got a picture of it there, and this is it. So basically what we did is we would cover this or not, obviously when the applicant couldn't see when we were doing it. And then we'd ask the applicant if it was covered or not. And it had to be this photo. And they had to hit, I believe that was 18 out of 20 as well. And they got the first one right and then several wrong. So they were going to try again in a year or so. Now, it was kind of interesting about this one. So they had to do this hit. So we, Randy, Stan, and I go online beforehand and just test everything and make sure it works. So we had Randy act as though she were the applicant, and she got 3 out of 3. She got 3 right in a row, and we were starting to panic. But fortunately, the applicant did not. Now, when we design these tests and we work with the applicants, we do it in a very respectful way. I mean, if they could do it, that would be amazing. So everyone in the class really is cheering for them. It's not meant to be a mockery of someone or anything like that. But if somebody really has these abilities, it would be incredible to show that they're able to do it under carefully controlled scientific conditions. As of yet, no one has been able to do it, but we'll be trying again next year. I also take my students on a ghost hunt. What we do is we go to different locations throughout Edmonton that are supposedly haunted, and we use the tools of the ghost hunters. Now, we are not out to show definitively that there is no such thing as ghosts. We're not out to prove that ghosts don't exist. We can't do that. What we can do, though, is show that what you see on TV or online can be explained with very reasonable and rational things. So it's not these paranormal explanations that ghost hunters would have you believe. So how do we do it? Well, if you want to learn more about this, Adrian Hill and Kat McLeod are reporters on the Skeptics Zone. And they have joined me the past 2 years, and they have been reporting on it. So I've got a QR code here that links to one of the Skeptics Zone podcasts that is coverage of the ghost hunt. And if you didn't catch this or you're pulling your phone out, I'll also put it on the last slide so you can catch it then. So they're part of it and you can hear a little bit more. But I'm just going to walk you through a few of the things that I have our students do as they conduct their ghost hunt. The first thing they do is background research on the location. We need to know which ghosts we're looking for. And often it's at that point that students start to become incredibly curious because, like, well, supposedly it's this ghost. We can't find any evidence at all that a person with that name or whatever tragedy that befell this poor ghost actually happened. I'll give you one of my favorite examples of this. We conducted a ghost hunt at the Edmonton Golf and Country Club. And the ghost was this. In the 1950s, and this actually happened, a man arrived at the golf club and he murdered his wife in the clubhouse. And there's some speculation that he believed she was cheating on him with the groundskeeper. A noose was later discovered on the bridge, and you see a picture of a bridge here. And a second body was located in the ravine below, so a body beyond the woman that was murdered. What had happened was that the person that committed the murder then hung themselves, but they made the rope too long. And when they jumped off the bridge, it actually popped their head clean off. So a very tragic case, and one that fits nicely with ghost stories, right? This horrific tragedy. Now, there are a number of supposed ghosts at the Edmonton Golf and Country Club, but one of them is that people will see headless bodies floating over the bridge. So they see this headless body. And that makes sense, right? Because that's where the murder happened, or the tragedy where the person lost their head, excuse me. Now, here's the problem, is that that's maybe true, but that's the wrong bridge. That bridge was taken down, and it's a new bridge. So people are seeing the headless body, but it's at a bridge where that actually didn't happen. Now, Just as a quick aside, and you're not going to believe this, as I was talking about the ghosts, all of the lights went out at MacEwan. Fortunately, I've got a lot of power on my laptop, so we're going to be okay. But the ghosts clearly did not like what I was talking about. So I apologize that it's now very dark in here. Hopefully the lights come back. One other ghost of note, we've gone to Concordia University in Edmonton for a few years, and I just love the name of the ghost. It's Larry. We're looking for Larry the Ghost, which is the least ghost-like name that I have ever heard. And we have yet to find Larry. So what kind of tools do the ghost hunters use? They're looking for changes in temperature. And the idea is that when somebody passes on, they leave some energy. So it's and there's a number of variations depending on which ghost hunter you ask. But the basic idea is that if there's a change in temperature, it's a reflection of a ghost. It's a little bit dark, but here is the tool that we use. So it's a laser thermometer. And let's say that the ghost is kind of right here. Okay, so that's the idea. What a ghost hunter would do is point this, laser comes out, and they'd say, oh no, there is a change in temperature. But I'm just going to show you something. So the way these work, hopefully you can see this here. See where the little laser is? That's actually what the temperature is measuring. It's measuring where it hits right here. Now, what the ghost hunters will say is that the ghost is in here somewhere, right? So you point it and say, there's a difference here, but it's actually measuring the temperature here. Now, the reason that matters is that if you wanted to make it seem like there was a drop in temperature, just point it at a window. The temperature will go down. So when you're watching this in ghost hunting shows, if they ever have one of these, and some of them don't, some of them are a little more accurate than others, I suppose, in their measurement of temperature. But if they're using one of these and they aim it at a window or a door, if it's drafty, that's what's going on. Another tool are these. These are cat toys, and they're very, very sensitive. So you put them on the ground, and if a cat bats them around, the lights go off. But if you just lay them down, they will probably start to flash on their own. And the reason ghost hunters use these is they say that if it flashes, that's the presence of a ghost. In fact, if you bump a table or you're walking around, they'll just roll and they'll start to light up. The ghost hunting industry is an interesting one. Let me show you, I got these on Amazon, and here's what I got them from. So if you slap ghost on something, it sells better. So you can see here, it's clearly meant to be a cat toy, but they put ghost in it. So it's a 4-piece ghost hunting cat ball, multi-flash color, blah, blah, blah. But even if you look at the image of the cat, it's a glowing, funny cat ball for ghosts for some reason. And EMF meters. So again, the idea is that spirits leave behind energy, or if there's a spirit there, there's energy. Again, depends on which ghost hunter you ask. So you can get an EMF reader, and if it goes off, that is supposedly the sign that it's a ghost. Now, these are meant to detect electromagnetic energy and so on, electromagnetic fields. So if you put it by a place where there's a lot of electricity, they'll go off. What ghost hunters will say is that if it goes off and there's nothing around that it's a sign of a ghost. So it starts to beep when it goes off. Now you can tell it's not beeping by the computer right now. I'm just going to put it by myself, and it's beeping like crazy. So what you can see is that just a little bit of static and it will start to beep. The funny thing about these, it's still beeping. It's the ghost. The lights are still out. If you buy a ghost hunting EMF meter, they are hundreds of dollars. This one was $17. And the irony of the more expensive ones is that they're worse, because you want the worst meter because you want it to go off randomly, then it seems like it works. So you'll find all kinds of things online that are for ghosts. They just cost way more and the quality is usually worse, especially if it's an EMF meter. And we also have dowsing rods that are made for hunting ghosts. Now I've got them here. So the way dowsing rods supposedly work is you hold them out like this and you walk, and they're typically used to find water. The idea would be that you hold them as straight as you can. If they cross, there is water there. Now these ones supposedly also find ghosts. A couple different ways. You could be walking around, and if they cross or go out, that's the sign of a ghost. You can also talk to ghosts, and if it crosses, it's a yes, out is a no, or vice versa. I can't remember. Now, think about this. Look at these amazing tools. And I got them for $16 online. $16 to talk to the dead. That's quite impressive. Now, believe it or not, I'm actually using these dowsing rods for some research. Let me tell you a bit about it. What I'm trying to do is develop some tools to help students become better scientific thinkers, to help them become better skeptics. So I built this device. You can see it here. There's also a picture of it. And this is off the advice of Kenny Biddle, who's done a lot of work in exploring the paranormal and so on. So what we did is we had people come into the lab, and we had a control condition where we just tested what their thoughts are on different pseudoscientific beliefs. And we had another condition where they just watched a short video on dowsing and showing why dowsing is deeply flawed. And the video, for those of you that are interested, was we cut it down to about 4 minutes or so. Now, another condition, people watch the video, and we also put the dowsing rods in this thing. Now, they're in here now. You'll see that there's a level here. Now, dowsing, the way it's supposed to work is you hold everything level and they kind of move on their own. It's due to energy. But what you see here is that if you hold it level, they'll never cross. The reason they cross at all when you hold them without this contraption is due to what's known as an ideomotor response. So we don't realize that we're making these small, subtle gestures and they'll cross. Since we don't realize it, it feels like the dowsing rods work. But when you put them in the device and you keep it level, they'll never cross. So what we want to see is if doing these kinds of demonstrations are more powerful than just watching a video, or more powerful than the control, of course. And that data was just collected a couple days ago. We finished up. So we have not looked at it yet, but fingers crossed that this will help people become better critical thinkers. We also bring a Ouija board to our ghost hunt. Now, if you watch any ghost hunting shows like Most Haunted and so on, they always bring a psychic, and we don't want to do that. Two reasons. One is that a lot of psychics are just straight up frauds. I do not want to give them money. And two, if somebody genuinely believes they have these powers, we don't want to make fun of them or put them in an environment that could be uncomfortable. So we use a Ouija board instead. The Ouija board works with the same principle as the dowsing rods. It's an ideomotor response. So you can see a picture here, and this is a picture of my students using the Ouija board. What's supposed to happen is you ask a question, and then the planchette starts moving, and it comes up with the answers. Now, it'll move, and people will swear they're not moving it, but again, it's a subtle gesture. It's an ideomotor response. If you want to debunk a Ouija board, all you have to do is blindfold the people using it. If they can't see the Ouija board, it doesn't work anymore. Blindfold them, turn the Ouija board upside down, give them the planchette. They will not get anything. So we let the students play with this. They can experience the feeling of having the planchette move and then try it with their eyes closed and see that there's nothing there. And we also look for orbs. So I have them take photos. And orbs, again, tie back to the idea that there's something about energy. It's ghosts and they're leaving energy, and orbs show up primarily in photographs, sometimes videos. It's usually photographs. And this photo here was taken by one of my students, and you can see all the orbs in this photo. A ghost hunter would have their mind blown by this. This is definitive proof that there are ghosts amongst us. What's really going on? Well, if there's any moisture in the air, which there happened to be that night, it was lightly raining, and you turn on your flash, you get orbs. That's how you can get them. If it's dusty and you have your flash on, you get orbs. It's also an artifact of some digital cameras, less so now as cameras are getting better. But that's it. So we have all kinds of pictures of orbs. And I tell my students during the ghost hunt to treat it seriously as though you were really a ghost hunter. But also, if you watch some of those shows, I'm pretty sure they cheat. And I said, so also try to cheat sometimes, see what you can do. So what we have here is a photo of the students cheating, and you can see there's streaks and there's a large orb in the middle. Again, very, very compelling evidence. And what the student did was they spit. they spit and took a photo of it. That is the spit midair, and that is your orb. We also look for instances of pareidolia. So again, at the beginning of a talk tonight, I was talking about how our brains are really hardwired for belief, and we're pattern seekers. Pareidolia refers to the tendency to perceive meaning in random visual patterns. So this was from a ghost hunt we did at the Paramount Theater. That's one of the chairs, and as you can see, there's clearly a face there. And of course, there is not, but since we're pattern seekers, we will see patterns when there are none there, and we're especially attuned to faces. So we're likely to see faces, even if perhaps it's just random stimuli. So the students take a lot of photos, and they try to create this. And here's just a couple. I thought this one was quite good. So we see this ghost in the background. What that really is two flashlights and the reflection off a window, but it really does look like a ghost, right? So these instances of photos with these ghostly images are very, very easy to recreate. And the reason we see these things is at least partially due to pareidolia. Now, what about people who go into a house and they say they feel uneasy? The hair on the back of their neck goes up and they feel some tension in their chest. How do you explain that? One explanation could be infrasound. A lot of people don't know what infrasound is. It's a low frequency sound below 20 hertz, and it's caused by things like thunder, traffic, or what's important for us is low rumbling pipes. Where do you find low rumbling pipes? You find them in old buildings. Old buildings tend to be associated with hauntings. Now, what does infrasound do? Imagine you're at a concert and there's a lot of bass at the concert. What will happen is you'll feel some tension in your chest, the hair on the back of your neck goes up and so on, but nothing scary there at all. You know what it is, it's from the music. But imagine there were no music. That's what infrasound is. So it's this really low frequency, like a low bass sound, but you can't hear it. It's outside the range of our hearing, but you can feel it. So imagine you walk into an old house, you walk in the basement, all of a sudden you get this tension and the hair on the back of your neck goes up. It's very reasonable to think that it could be a ghost. So when people have some of these beliefs, it's quite understandable to see why they would think such things. So if you want to do a test to see if there's infrasound, I'll show you how to do it. You can buy mics for it. I'm doing some research in the area. The mics are incredibly expensive. They're like $10,000. But if you want to just see generally if there's infrasound, what you can do is if you have a lighter or a candle, put it in the area where you suspect there to be infrasound. In the video you see here, that is an infrasound speaker that I built. And I just turned it on, and you'll notice that the flame is starting to do some strange things. Now, there's a lot of infrasound there. As you can see, it's right in front of the speaker. But the flame will start to kind of turn like that. Without that much infrasound, it'll mostly just bend in half. So you don't know how much infrasound is there, but you know there's some. At one of our ghost hunts, we found infrasound. So you see here, this would definitely be less infrasound, but there's no breeze in that room. And you can see that the flame is kind of bending in the middle. That's a very good sign that infrasound is present. And in that area too, some of the students felt just a bit uncomfortable. Makes sense. It is due to infrasound. So if you ever want to see if there's infrasound in a supposedly haunted area, and it's typically in the basements, the higher the flame you can get, the better, because then you can see if it's starting to bend and so on. But that will tell you if there's at least a little bit of infrasound there. And the last component of our ghost hunt, and this was new to this year, we created a psychomantium. The idea behind a psychomantium is that if you stare into a mirror in low light, you can then communicate with spirits. You communicate with the dead, and they may manifest themselves as another face, or they may manifest themselves over your face. This is very easy to set up. What you do is have a scenario like I have here in the image. Ideally, you want the mirror to be about at a 25-degree angle. So this should be about 25 degrees off of the wall there. And you want very low light. And if you stare into it, in fact, your face will start to morph. Is it spirits and ghosts? No, it is not. We can explain this. So on our retina, we have different types of receptors. Cones, which provide sharp, color-rich vision in bright light, and rods, which dominate in low light and in the periphery. But vision is less precise, so it's not where we're looking at, where there's not a lot of visual acuity when it's processing in the rods. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that, but for what we're discussing today, that's essentially what's going on. So it's this processing in the periphery. So to give you a sense of what this looks like, we can use a demo here of the periphery. So this came in second place in a visual illusions contest. So I'll just run it here. What you need to do is just stare at that X in the middle and then just watch the faces. They're not morphing, these are normal faces, but keep your eyes focused on that cross in the middle and watch what happens. This is analogous to what you'll see with the psychomantium. It's not quite this dramatic, and it takes a bit longer with the psychomantium. It'll take a minute or two of staring into that mirror, but this is essentially what your face will start to look like. Now, again, if you're told that this is spirits and ghosts that are visiting you, it could be quite frightening, right? But that's what's going on. So it's very easy to set up. You might have to play around with it a bit to get the lighting right. And when we did this on our ghost hunt, different students seem to have different sensitivity towards it. So some would have the lights closer, some farther back. But if you play with it a bit, you will be able to create an effect very similar to the one you just saw here. So what's next for our classes? We were hoping to have a pseudoscience fair this year. I had my students prepare demos that highlighted different forms of pseudoscience and effectively debunked them. So my students created demos on divination boards, horoscopes, UFOs, UAPs, therapeutic touch, you name it. And we were going to invite a high school in to then learn about all these different demos. Unfortunately, there was a scheduling problem with the high school. They weren't able to do it, so we were ready to go. We could not do it, but hopefully we'll do that next year. What I'm trying to do is bring in younger students so they can get a better sense of, what pseudoscience is and so on, and they can do it in a way that's really engaging and really exciting. On that note, what we're going to do next semester as well is something right now we're tentatively calling pseudoscience in a pub. So not only do I want students to get more exposure to scientific skepticism, I also want just the general public to get more exposure. So one of the assignments for my students next semester will be that they're going to have to create a presentation on a pseudoscientific topic. And then we're actually going to open it up to the public. We're going to go to a nearby pub or restaurant, and we're going to have an evening. We're going to charge for it, and people are going to learn about pseudoscience. The reason we're charging for it is that money is then going to go back into the university and back specifically to courses that are focused on teaching pseudoscience. So I'll use it to help pay for buses to bring grade school and junior high kids in. I'm going to use it to potentially teach a course that might have a component where students travel to Brazil. So it's all going to go back into helping people become better critical thinkers, to helping our students foster this critical thinking among others. Now, for those of you that are out there, I can't see the comments or anything, but I have a favor to ask of you. We don't have a good title for this yet. Pseudoscience in a pub is, it's okay. But if anybody's got a really clever title for what this should be, please tell me and we'll use it. So we could use something to kind of be the hook to grab people to make them want to come see what I'm sure are going to be some really great presentations. So how do we build better skeptics? Education is really the key. There's research by Katie Dyer and Ray Hall showing that if you do courses like the one I'm describing, that students become better scientific thinkers. They taught a 3-month course, and what they found is that by the end of the course, conspiracy beliefs went down, belief in the paranormal went down. So there's real world impact. Now, the problem is that there's not a lot of these courses at universities. So I think what we really need to do is incorporate more scientific skepticism into just general lectures, general courses, which is something I do with all of my courses. I'm a psychologist, but every course you take from me, regardless of what it is going to have a heavy component focused on scientific skepticism. On top of that, I think we need to start a lot sooner in education. As soon as we start teaching science, we should be teaching scientific skepticism. And we don't need to go that deep, but as soon as kids start learning about science, they should be learning about ideas like extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, correlation doesn't equal causation, those types of ideas. One of the reasons that this probably doesn't happen is that teachers are incredibly busy. This would be a little bit outside of the curriculum. So what I'm trying to do is develop resources, test them, to empirically test them, see if they actually have an impact, and then just give them away. Give them to teachers who are interested. So I'll just give you a quick example. I'm doing some work right now. This is just getting off the ground with my honor student, Taz Chahun. And what we're doing is creating some online tools for younger students, specifically junior high, high school, that we hope will promote scientific skepticism. So this is actually a screenshot from one of the little demos we're going to have them do. And it's going to come back to what I discussed earlier with that Barnum effect, that Forer statements. Students will get their horoscope. And in fact, it'll be just a general statement that everyone gets the same. And we're going to do these with very short demos. We know that these are students who are used to things like TikTok. It's going to be that type of style. I'm going to ask for another favor from the audience. So we're going to launch this study in the fall of 2026. We'd like to do a cross-cultural study. We've got some schools lined up here in Edmonton. We've got potentially some schools in India. And if anybody is an educator in junior high or high school and they'd like to be involved, so show this to your classes. Basically, students would see some demos. They'd answer some questions on pseudoscience. If you're interested, please contact me. We would love to have you on board. What else do we need to do to build better skeptics? We need to stay curious and we need to promote curiosity. So when we confront pseudoscience or we confront some extraordinary ideas, we should be leading with questions. We should be curious. So the minute you shut down someone's ghost story or UFO sighting and basically tell them that's crazy, that can't be true, you've lost them. And that's not what we want, right? But if you start asking questions and you become genuinely curious, like, what did you see? How else do you think we could explain this? Well, now they're thinking alongside you, right? Not against you. Every ghost hunt that my students go on, I tell them, and I'm honest, I hope we find something we can't explain. We never have, but that would be fascinating. That's the kind of mindset we want to have. Curiosity is the opposite of contempt, right? So a good skeptic should be genuinely interested in why people believe what they believe. What draws them to these paranormal explanations? Is it fear? Is it wonder? Is it a need for meaning? What is it? And I think with some of the examples that I've shown you today, we can give some interesting alternative explanations. Someone believes in ghosts. And again, we can't disprove the existence of ghosts, but you could say something like, it's amazing our brains can generate ghost-like images. Have you heard of a psychomantium? Well, let me tell you how to build one. Isn't this weird? You're going to get people thinking differently, right? That's way, way better than just saying ghosts aren't real. What are you thinking about? And implying that they're not intelligent. So curiosity keeps our minds open and critical. I mean, that's good critical thinking. And we also need to practice intellectual humility, which is something that Scott Lilienfeld, who's done a lot of work in this area, sadly, he passed away a few years ago, but he was promoting that what we really need to do is be able to admit that we might be wrong, or at the very least that we don't know everything. We lack full knowledge. So we need to be able to recognize our own fallibility. This comes back to that idea of the bias blind spot, right? We all have these biases. We just think that everybody else has them. The problem is that most people have very low tolerance for ambiguity. And people want answers. Are there ghosts or not? Well, we don't know, but there's certainly not a lot of good evidence, and we can easily explain a lot of what the ghost hunters do, right? In science, we don't talk very often about proving something. So we'll say, well, this suggests, or this is consistent with. But scientists really live in a world of ambiguity. So the goal is not certainty, it's the best current explanation we have, and we're ready to shift if new data arrives. And that's the perspective we should have. Now, of course, there are some things where we get so much data that it becomes a law, effectively. But for most things, we're always looking for more data. Can we fine tune our theories? Or is there contradicting evidence that's solid? I mean, that's what intellectual humility is all about. And that's the perspective that we want scientific skeptics to take, right? And I think this is one of the most important ones, is that we need to be empathetic, really put ourselves in the heads of others. Let me give you an example. And this is what I'm going to finish up with today, is talking about empathy. But I went to a pharmacy recently. My daughter was 10 at the time. She had a bad cough. So I asked for something to help with the cough. And the pharmacist recommended what you see on the screen here. And that is a homeopathic cough remedy, which does nothing. Now, what I said to the pharmacist, and I'm not making any of this up, I said to the pharmacist, so she hands it to me. I was like, this is homeopathic. She goes, that's right. I said, do you have anything that works? And she said, without missing a beat, oh, you want something that works? Okay, this way. And just took me somewhere else. I couldn't believe it. But imagine you didn't know anything about homeopathy. You've asked a pharmacist, you're in a legitimate pharmacy, they recommend it. Now, let's say you give it to your child, they'll eventually get better, right? Unless it's something extremely serious. If it's a cold, they'll probably eventually get better. It's completely understandable that somebody would believe homeopathy is effective. And then skeptics come along and say, well, it doesn't work and it's preposterous. Well, it worked for me. I saw it work. So when we come from that idea of being empathetic, I'm not saying sympathetic, empathetic, can we get ourselves in their shoes? Can we get into their heads and start to understand why they believe what they believe? And when you approach paranormal belief with empathy, three things happen. First, people actually listen to you. They don't feel attacked. They don't dig in. So they will listen to someone who takes them seriously. They will not listen to someone who ridicules them. The other thing, number two, it helps us stay grounded in why skepticism matters. It's not about winning arguments. It's about helping people navigate a confusing world with better tools. It's helping them think like scientists. And third, you're modeling what intellectual humility looks like, right? We can admit we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. The best skeptics are the ones that people want to talk to, not the ones they want to avoid. So my fellow skeptics, we need to stay curious, we need to be tolerant of ambiguity, and we need to be genuinely kind. And with that, I open it up to questions, and the QR code is there if you would like to hear that podcast about our ghost hunt. Thanks, everyone.
I was trying to get a picture of the QR code. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I have a question. So I'm referring back to where you were talking to the high school kids about bias blind spot and asking them if they were above average, getting along with others. Was there a definition that you made of what average was, and perhaps ask them to point out other students they thought fit that average and getting along with others? Or
yeah,
so do the definition in their own mind?
With that research, I didn't conduct that research. That's older research. Yeah, it's about 30 years old. So it's from this massive data set of 1 million. And the question simply was, what is your ability to get along with others? And then you'd rate as above average or not. So it was a massive survey, and they asked a lot of questions. So it wasn't research that was necessarily focused on, things like skepticism and so on. It was just to get this more general survey. And from that, we can then look at some of the biases that people had, because it was surprising that everyone saw themselves as above average. So there wasn't that much detail in the questions. It was really just a very straightforward question. And again, older data. Yeah.
Okay, because I would be curious to see who each person would point out as being average.
It would be really interesting.
Yeah. And the other thing is, do you have any suggestions on tools that you can use for, say, younger children? Because I think that early elementary school you can probably start, but by junior high school you should be kind of revving up, teaching about pseudoscience. And are there any tools you can point out?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we're doing some of this research is to
Mhm.
develop some of those tools.
Mhm.
There are some things out there. Actually, the James Randi Foundation put out some small booklets and pamphlets that were aimed more towards grade school children, junior high children. I think the key is to provide resources that are incredibly engaging and that gets their attention. So what we're thinking is you could talk about things like Bigfoot, which is a relatively
Oh,
benign topic, right?
yeah.
And kids would find that interesting. Even ghosts you can get away with. You got to be a little bit careful though. You don't want to alienate anyone and you
Right.
don't want to upset parents. But if you can take it with examples at the younger age that are maybe a bit not silly, but Bigfoot's a little bit silly. So those types of examples, I think, are the way to go. So that's what we're trying to test right now is to provide those resources, validate them, see if they actually have an impact. And then again, we'll just give them to schools, to anyone who's interested.
Okay. And I see you co-authored the textbook titled Psychology from Inquiry to Understanding that's in its third printing. And I also see that you have another book coming up about productivity.
Yeah. Well, we're actually the textbook is going to its sixth edition, the Canadian edition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Scott Lilienfeld, who I mentioned earlier, was the
Mhm.
lead author on the book. And the book really puts a strong focus on scientific skepticism. So it's in chapter 1. We identify some of the principles of scientific thinking. We talk directly about different forms of pseudoscience. So it is still an introductory psychology book,
Okay.
but we really do place that strong emphasis on pseudoscience. And then I actually have 2 books that are potentially in the works. I'm writing a book, and we've still got a ways to go, a little bit of
Mhm.
things to do to make sure these books happen. But one is on the science of ghosts. So it's what science says about ghosts.
Oh, okay.
And that book will incorporate a lot of what I talked about today. So it'll be the rational explanations for these supposedly paranormal findings. And the other book is on productivity. It's looking at some of the myths in productivity, and it's looking at some tangible strategies that people can actually use to become more productive.
Oh, okay. And with that, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. The first one is from Jay. Can you talk about the applicants for the paranormal test? Are they trying to con you? What do they say when they fail?
Yeah, that's what I was really interested in when we started. I was worried we're going to be getting a lot of magicians or people like that. And in my conversations with Stan, the vast majority of people that he has tested, him and Randy and Jim, they genuinely believe. They believe, and when they fail, they usually come up with some explanations, kind of cognitive dissonance at work, really. So Stan has been the one who's been leading the test. So our class develops the test, and then Stan walks through, and we are involved in conducting the test as well. But Stan always asks them, what do you think went wrong? And you'll get things like one person said, well, and it was actually quite sad. He was very disappointed because remember, when people do this, they think they're going to walk away with $500,000. They genuinely believe they're going to win. And this person failed. And they said, look, what happened was I had a fight with my wife this morning. It was just this sad story. And, you know, everybody was cheering for him, but that was how he justified it. With the person with the photo, they just said they were basically having an off day. It just wasn't happening that day, but they're going to try it again. So it's often an explanation that is just, it's a bad day. You know, they just felt off that day. And most of them plan to try it again. So we had a person that we tested last year, and she claims that she can control the weather. And what she can do, supposedly, is that she'll make clouds just disappear. So we had a bunch of Zoom cameras of cloudy places lined up, and she had 2 hours. And what she said you'll see is that the clouds will just slowly move. And of course, they didn't. The clouds moved as clouds normally move, but nothing unusual. And she said it was the locations. She just struggles with those particular locations. She said she was just kind of having an off day, but she felt like she'd moved them a little bit, and she's going to try again in a year. And that will be the 3rd time she's tried. So she genuinely believes she can do it. She just doesn't believe that particular test she's having an off day. Basically, that's what she believes for that. Just one other interesting note on that too. When we do these paranormal challenges, we work with the applicants very closely, especially Stan and Randy. So we're working with them. They have to agree that the test is fair. The test is something that they can do. So it's not like we're trying to trick them or fool them. It's very transparent. We're working with them. We're trying to support them if they have these abilities, but it has to be carefully controlled. So it has to be tested using the scientific method, but we will work together and agree on something that mutually is okay for both parties.
Okay, next question. Caitlin Schmaltz asked, how do researchers separate naturally occurring infrasound, like wind or earthquakes, from signals that might indicate human-made activity?
Yeah, well, it's infrasound is very hard to measure, but we can usually find out where the infrasound is coming from. So it's not like you get an infrasound measurement and say, okay, this is man-made. So say, it's generated by a speaker like I've done, or this is from traffic. But what you can do is you measure the infrasound, and then you start to look for the source. Often in boiler rooms, there will be a lot of infrasound. So if you're in a basement and you're getting infrasound, you can probably figure out and kind of deduce where it is. So it's really up to the person who's testing the infrasound to try to find the source of that infrasound. And then, of course, as you get closer, the amount of infrasound goes up.
Okay, next question. From Jay, how do you know ghosts don't cause infrasound?
That's right. So some of the proponents of this say that, well, the infrasound is caused by ghosts. Okay, maybe, but we can also usually find that source. So building on the last answer, you can say, okay, well, maybe it's a ghost, but we've also got this boiler. And this boiler is clearly making infrasound. Let me show you how we know. We put the microphone here, more infrasound. We put it over here, no infrasound. So if you had a situation where there's infrasound, you can't find any explanation whatsoever, that's when a ghost hunter might say something like, well, the ghost is creating the infrasound, but the vast majority of the time you can find it. And if you're not sure, again, so if you're in a basement somewhere, it could be that there's traffic above, and sometimes even things like thunder will create infrasound. So usually we can figure out where it's coming from.
Okay, one last question. Caitlin asked, are there any confirmed health effects from long-term exposure to infrasound?
Yes. Well, no, sort of. So there's this idea that if anybody has heard of the brown note, the idea is that if you get a huge exposure of infrasound, you will actually basically your bowels will be released.
Your bowels.
That's right. It would have to be so remarkably loud. I think that's an urban legend. It's a myth. Theoretically, if you got it loud enough and had a lot of exposure, you'd make you very uncomfortable. But at the levels that we're at, it's entirely safe. So you can feel something, but it's not having a strong physiological impact. We've done some research. It actually does have an impact on cortisol levels, which is a hormone associated with stress. But it's relatively short-lived, so it's just in the presence of the infrasound. So to have an actual strong negative effect, you would need a lot of infrasound. It would have to be remarkably loud.
Okay, well, thank you for your talk. It was fascinating. I'll be ordering your psychology book.
All right.
I want to read. Yeah, I'm really curious about that. And so stay tuned for information about our next talk. Should I?
All right. Thanks very much, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. So California has spent billions of dollars combating homelessness, yet has the largest and fastest growing population of unhoused people in the nation. Please join us Thursday, January 8th at 7:30 p.m. for a thought-provoking talk titled The Myth of the Homeless Industrial Complex by our first speaker of the new year, Carrie Sager. And I think that's a wrap.